Hey guys, Jake Steele, Iron and Steel. This is podcast episode number 16. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I'm apparently joined this episode by my dog, Piper, who's in here with me for really no good reason other than she was being a whiny little baby when I was trying to get this done, scratching at the door and whatnot. So, yeah, I had to let her in and she's in here with us. So, I guess if you hear any crying or whimpering or whining, it is for once not me. So anyway, last episode I read you a story off of my website, which is ironandsteel.com. The story was the first of a two-part deal that I wrote a couple of years ago. The first story was called Selling Made Easy. And today I'm going to read you the follow-up, which is called, believe it or not, it's called Buying Made Easy. And I know, very shocking. It was a two-part series of articles that I wrote a couple years ago and published on the site, basically looking at the process of buying and selling an antique car, classic car, hot rod, what have you. And basically just looking through the lens of both the buyer and the seller to sort of give you the best shot at successfully selling a car, and in this case sort of putting you at the front of the line, I guess, to give you the opportunity to buy an old car or hot rod, classic car, whatever. Believe it or not, there is an art to doing both buying and selling, and a lot of people have no fucking idea how to do it, and I realize that more every day, every thing that I sell and every person that I encounter. So anyway, I wrote these couple of articles a few years ago. Again, go back and listen to the first one. It was called Selling Made Easy. That was the last podcast. This is called Buying Made Easy. And they're both available on the website, ironandsteel.com. While you're there, hit the subscribe button, punch in your email, and you can be, I guess, sort of kept up to date when there's new content, like fresh podcasts or new articles published on the site, or new ridiculous merch like this serial killer stuff that I'm doing right now. One of which is available on the site as we speak, along with a bunch of other ridiculous, stupid, hilarious, awesome, terrible merch. So anyway, ironandsteel.com. Go there, check it out for yourself firsthand. Or don't. I really don't give a shit. So at any rate, again, this is called Buying Made Easy. And afterward, I'm going to answer some questions that I received this week. So we'll do a little Q&A thing at the end and kind of see where we go from there. So again, thanks so much for being here. This story is called Buying Made Easy, or at least less hard. So here's the thing. This article is written operating on the premise that you are a genuinely interested and qualified buyer. If you're a bullshitter, time waster, tire kicker, etc., I cannot help you. Nor would I want to, as there is nothing more annoying than these motherfuckers from the perspective of the seller. If you're a bullshitter, stop being one of those first, then read on. In this case, listen on. The most important thing that we should realize is that the guy selling whatever it is wading through a sea of these aforementioned tire kickers and time wasters. Nobody enjoys the process of selling something. So knowing this, the best thing we can do is to try to make it as simple as possible. Nothing will give you a leg up more than establishing right out of the gate that you're not there to waste anyone's time. As long as you mean it. So first things first, making initial contact. Look, I can tell a bullshitter from a mile away just from their first call, their first text, or email. If you think coming in like some big swinging dick and making a lowball offer is a good idea, you are 100% wrong. There should never be any discussion at all whatsoever about price right off the bat, period. If you're one of these, "What's the least you'll take?" motherfuckers, you need to go back to the last sentence of the last paragraph that I just read. Nobody wants to deal with it. And nobody wants to deal with you. Think of the first contact like a job interview. You should be gathering as much information as you can about the car and the person selling it, while being as nice as humanly possible. If it sounds like something you want to see in person, ask them to schedule a time to come and look. Something like, "That sounds like something I'd be very interested in. Is there a time that's convenient for you to have me out?" Nobody wants to feel like they're losing control of the transaction right out of the gate, especially over the phone. Don't tell them how it's going to be. Ask them how they'd like to move forward. Believe me, if you want to see someone clam up on you and sell it to the next guy, act like some big shot right out of the gate. Remember, this is their car. Now, part of the game is identifying what the seller's story is. Different people are motivated by different things, and people sell for a lot of different reasons. Figuring out what the seller's motivation is as quickly as possible is going to go a long way to helping you establish a rapport. In my opinion, there are 3 main categories of sellers. Number 1, thinning the herd guy. This guy either built the car or has owned the car for a long period of time, or he's at least been involved with the hobby for years or decades. He knows old cars really well, and he's probably had plenty of them over the years. Number 2, the happy idiot. This is the guy who has inherited an old car and he just doesn't know anything about it, or he's somehow happened onto some kind of situation that's put this thing into his lap for nothing or close to nothing. Now, these people aren't actual idiots. They're just usually ignorant about old cars. And happy ignoramus just had less of a ring to it. Number 3, the flipper. This is pretty straightforward. There are lots of dudes out there trying to rip a car from both of the guys I just mentioned and flip it to a guy like you. So, those are 3 really different kinds of sellers. They all have one thing in common, though. They hate the process of selling a car. Why? Remember the bullshitter we just talked about? So these guys are dealing with that guy times 10, and they're already tired of him. The number one thing that motivates a seller, believe me or not, is not maximum profit. It is being done with the process of selling. That's why you need to know who you're dealing with and know how to navigate them to the best possible outcome. As an example, thinning the herd guy is the toughest one of all to buy from. Inevitably, he has some sort of emotional attachment to the car he's selling. He's usually getting older and realizing he maybe can't keep them all, or maybe he's getting out of the hobby completely. Whatever the situation is, he is likely attached to it emotionally somehow. An emotional attachment equates to, at least in their mind, monetary value. This can be a difficult thing to overcome, but it is not impossible. The best way to score points with these guys is to be genuinely interested in the car's story, and especially their story. Can you hear my fucking dog up there? Jesus Christ. I kicked her out because she was being a pest, and she's still being a pest upstairs. So, Anyway, these guys want to be heard. They want to be complimented on the car, and they want to be complimented on the job they did restoring it. They want validation. They're proud of this car, and they want to know that whoever it goes to is going to appreciate it as much as they did. And in the end, that will likely mean more to them than getting a little bit more money by selling it to someone who may appreciate it less. If you do a good job of building a relationship with them, they're not going to want to deal with anyone else. They will want to sell it to you, maybe even for less money. And a really good example of this is my 32 3-window purchase in an article I wrote called Better Lucky Than Good. I think that's also a podcast. You'll have to look and see. The flipper. Now, the flipper is either really hard or really easy to buy from. These guys often fancy themselves experts in some way and sometimes operate on both profit margins and ego. They still want to feel like they're in control, and there's no emotional angle for you to try and leverage. So all I can say is be straightforward and respectful, and remember that these guys are used to the process of negotiation. So when you get to that point, throw out a price that leaves at least some room to haggle back and forth with. Ideally, they'll give you a sort of bottom line price first, and that'll tell you a lot about what the real number can end up being. Don't forget that this guy wants to move on with their lives too. There's always room if you play the game correctly, and sometimes there's no game to play at all. That's the nice thing about the flipper. It's just numbers. You usually won't offend them personally by making an offer, as long as the offer itself is not insulting, of course. And don't get hung up on the idea that this guy is going to, quote, make a buck on you. That is 100% irrelevant. If the deal makes sense for both of you, great. If not, no big deal. Then there's the happy idiot. And this happens a lot more than you think. A guy ends up with dad's old car. He sees big dollar signs at the end of the rainbow. It's about a 50-50 split when dad dies. The kid wants to sell it right now for cash and be done with it immediately, or he got caught up in some romantic idea that he would keep the car and the family, and it's been sitting untouched in the garage for 7 years. And now he realizes he could probably buy a nice boat for that money and be much happier. Now, usually they don't know much about the car other than what dad had told him about it, and that dad really loved it. Usually dad spent a lifetime telling these kids how rare and valuable these cars are. So the fun part about these guys is negotiating the balance of, I just want to be done with it, give me some cash, and this was dad's pride and joy, and it must be worth $1 million. These guys are the guys that say shit like, well, looking around, I'm seeing these things bring like $65,000 restored. They don't realize that it took $100,000 to restore it. Anyway, it's always a challenge to educate in a respectful way, but it can be done. With the happy idiot, the same respect should be given to dad's legacy as you would be giving if he were standing in front of you right then and there. Yes, the kid wants to sell it. Yes, he wants quick cash. But no, he doesn't want anyone coming over and telling him that his dad's beloved old car is a big hunk of shit. Spend less time picking the car apart, more time asking about dad, and that will go a long way. Make a fair offer in a nice way while reassuring him that you will give the car the home it deserves. Deep down, the happy idiot wants someone to take over where dad left off and where they failed. They want to see it go to somebody who will appreciate it as much as their relative did, as much as they did, someone just like you. No matter who you're dealing with, handle your logistics first. By that, I mean have cash in hand, at least a deposit, and easy access, that means same day, to the balance. Know how you're going to transport this thing. If you don't own a trailer, have an idea whether you're going to borrow one or rent one. U-Haul's a great cheap option. Or if you're going to have to call a tow company, whatever the case may be. Know all of this stuff ahead of time. Nobody wants to sell something and have it turn into a 3 or 4 part adventure that spans a bunch of days and 25 phone calls while you figure out how to get the money and get the car home. The name of the game is always convenience when you're looking for leverage, period. Something a lot of people don't realize. Fortunately, knowing this will set you apart from the rest and give you the ability to snag the car that you want. So my advice, 3 different types of sellers, all one common theme: respect, foresight, follow through. A novel idea, right? Okay, there you have it. Buying made easy, or at least less hard. Again, ironandsteel.com is the website. That article is there, probably on the second page or so. You can go there and read it for yourself if you want to. I don't know why you would. I just fucking read it to you. So what more do you want? But I digress. Ironandsteel.com is the website. Lots of good content on there. Lots of content at the very least. And it's all free, so feel free to hop over there and check it out. Again, hit the subscribe button, punch in your fucking email. It takes just a second. So, then you can be up to date on new content, which is several things a week, fresh articles, new podcasts, whatever, ridiculous merch, whatever the case may be. So hop over there and check it out at your leisure. So maybe we should dive into this Q&A situation, and then we can say our goodbyes. So I did get a few pretty good questions come through this week, and we'll just bounce through this and see where it leads. So the first question was, who introduced you to your love of old Fords, and how far back does it go? So I think I've touched on this maybe a few episodes ago. I was asked kind of a similar question. I don't have a great story where like my dad or my grandpa was like some 50s hot rodder. It's ingrained in me and all that stuff. My dad has a passing interest in cars. He grew up in the 60s and 70s, so really more of a muscle car guy. My bullshit, he's like, hey, neat, yeah, it's cool, but it might as well be a spaceship to him. If you had a 70 Camaro or Chevelle or something, he'd be all about it. But these clunky old Fords, hot rods and customs, 40s and 50s type of stuff, I don't have a great story. Uncle Pappy didn't fucking pass it down or whatever. So how far back does it go? At least 20 years. I was in my late teens, early 20s when I got seriously interested in traditional hot rods and customs and race cars and all this stuff. So I don't know what the specific origin of it was, but whatever it was, it did a number. It's turned itself into a full-fledged obsession, I guess. So hopefully that answered your question. The next one was, I thought this was interesting. I've never been asked a question like this before, but it says, any tips for us wives trying to support our car guys? Great question. I don't know. I think it's kind of a difficult question for me to answer because I have sort of the dream scenario. My wife is awesome, totally understanding. We have interests of our own that are separate. And she is good about sort of joining me when there's the opportunity to do collective car things. She likes old cars and thinks that they're neat or whatever, but it's not her passion. So, I don't know. I would just say being supportive and understanding. joining your husband in certain car-related things in a supportive way while not being overbearing about it, not being super judgmental, realizing that really for a lot of us, this is not a hobby. It is truly an obsession, and maybe being understanding about that. When your guy is out in the garage until 3 a.m. or whatever, just cut him some slack, I guess, basically, and just be a normal, functioning, nice person in the other facets of your relationship, and everything should just work out fine. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting question. Don't really know how to answer it other than be more like my wife, I guess. So let's see. Favorite car-themed movies, or your take on the hits, good, bad, or ugly? I'm not a big movie guy, so I don't know, like Fast and Furious, like I don't know what we're talking about necessarily. So the hits, in my opinion, would be all of the sort of staples, 2-lane blacktop, American Graffiti. American Graffiti is a little cheesy. I've got to be in the right mood for it. The music, it's the whole thing. From the perspective of like cinema, cars, and those two together and that relationship, pretty fucking great movie. There's not a lot of great car movies out there, period. In fact, 2-Lane Blacktop and American Graffiti really are the only two I can think of, other than Christine, which is a great movie in its own right too. I like horror films and stuff, so naturally that's on my list too. But anything outside of those, few movies like that everybody kind of knows, I don't know a lot about, anything that came after that, really. So not a big movie guy, more into documentaries. Speaking of which, there's a killer documentary on Lion's Drag Strip. It's like a 2-part DVD deal. That would be toward the top of my list if I were picking and choosing. Even though it's not a car movie, excuse me, it is definitely, obviously, car related, and it's awesome. I think it's called Lions the Last. I don't want to screw it up, but it's Lions. It's a documentary about Lion's Drag Strip. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. I'm sure you can find it online. But anyway, so that was that. The last question, a few people have asked me this. So it came through. It said, are you planning to write a story about Pacanal's legacy and or the accident? I will never write a story about that day, what occurred and his passing. I will never write a story about that. Yes, I was there. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life, and I want to completely forget that it ever happened, and I don't want to associate that in any way with Pat Ganal. In other words, I want to forget that is part of his story at all. So no, I'll never write a story about that day. Okay. As far as, are you planning to write a story about Pat Ganal's legacy? Possibly, but the deal is there's already so many people writing that story that are a lot more qualified than me to write it. So at some point, maybe I'll write my spin on it. But Pat Ganal is a guy that really kind of needs no introduction, that type of thing. He certainly doesn't need some slapdick like me to write his story. There's a lot of great guys, fantastic writers out there that are already on that. There's been countless articles, stories and things already written just in the short amount of time since he passed away. So no, I don't think I'll write a story about, quote, Pat Ganal's legacy. I may write maybe some sort of a short story or whatever about my brief relationship with him and the conversations that I've had with him and my impression of him, I guess, which is favorable. Spoiler alert. So He's a great guy. At some point, maybe I'll write something. At this point, it would seem a little forced, and I'm not really interested in rushing to that. But maybe at some point, I'll write something related to Pacanol. But so those were kind of the good questions that came through this week. If you sent a question through that I didn't answer, and now you're pissed because I didn't lump it in the pile of good questions, I don't know what to tell you. Ask a better question. Again, ironandsteel.com is the website. Thank you again so much for being here. Jump over to the site, check out this stupid serial killer t-shirt, and buy it, because it is pretty fancy stuff. Your fellow churchgoers are going to love it. So again, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully you enjoyed this article, and I guess I will speak to you guys again in exactly 7 days.